Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the most important recording projects ever. Yeah, and this is really a big deal, and one that has a personal significance for me because I was sort of there for it and very marginally involved in a way that we'll get to in a moment. But it's the completion of Bridge Records' Complete Crumb Edition. This is a genuine recording project, and it reflects an unbelievable amount of dedication and effort on the part of a tiny label that specializes in contemporary music that very few people care about, and that has stuck through its determination to document the really important and beautiful and magical music of one of the great figures of the second half of the 20th century, George Crumb, and into the 21st century. Bridge has issued a press release, which I'm going to read, which I don't normally do, but I really think it deserves the attention because this is a real happening thing, like today, with music that is recent, and I can't even begin to overstate the significance of the achievement that this represents. I really can't. So let me just give you some of the press release highlights. On March 3rd, 2024, coming up, Bridge Records will release Volume 21 of its Complete Crumb Edition, a recording project begun in 1982 and completed 42 years later with this final installment. And I have to say, the final installment is actually, it's a little bit sad because as long as Crumb was alive and composing, the edition was ongoing. But since last year or a year before or so, a couple of years, he's no longer with us, and so now it has to come to an end. The Crumb series documents the late American composer's complete catalog of works, spanning Crumb's 75-year compositional career. Project producer David Starobin writes that, quote, the series benefited tremendously from George's participation in the recording and post-production of these documents, unquote. So we have the composer's imprimatur on all of these volumes. Over the decades, Crumb also made appearances on the series as pianist, percussionist, narrator, and video commentator. Series annotator Dr. Stephen Bruns writes, quote, since the founding of Bridge Records in 1981, the Complete Crumb Edition has been an integral part of the label's mission. This final installment includes compositions from the beginning, middle, and end of Crumb's long and distinguished careers, unquote. Volume 21 features the world premiere recording of the composer's penultimate composition, the percussion quintet, Kronos Kryptos, Time Secret. Ooh, baby, I can't wait to hear that. Performed by a quintet of percussionists from the Curtis Institute of Music at Philadelphia. Crumb's final work, Metamorphoses Book 2, can be heard on Volume 20 of the series, performed by Mark Antonio Barone. Volume 21 also includes Crumb's second acknowledged composition, the Sonata for Solo Cello of 1955, performed by cellist Timothy Eddy, as well as two performances of Crumb's piano solo Processional, played by pianist Gilbert Kalish, the keyboard version, and Mark Antonio Barone, the version with inside piano additions. Anyway, so there we go. It's coming along, and it's finished, and I can't wait to hear the last installment, and I'm sad that it's coming to an end, but thrilled to be able to listen to all of it. And now I just want to take you through what I have so far, because I haven't heard the last volume, my 5 favorite installments thus far, just so you know what they are, and can give you an insight into maybe how you would like to start your own Crumb collection, and you should. Crumb's music appeals to a very wide range of people. He had a following. He had almost a cult following. When I was in high school in the 70s and 80s, his Ancient Voices of Children had like this mystique. It was modern, but it was also somehow ancient. It was primal. I mean, Crumb described music, he said, as a series of proportions in the service of a spiritual impulse. So you have sort of this combination of spirituality, mathematics. It really was an interesting vision. And his music is that way. He wrote, aside from the early orchestral variations and a couple of things called sonata, he wrote nothing in traditional forms. a lot of stuff with texts, a lot to Spanish poetry by the Spanish poet Lorca. Really, and he wrote music in clumps, series of things, which make it rather easy to digest. If you like one thing in the clump, you'll like the rest of the clump. But aside from that, his music adhered to no system. It was as he heard it. He was a chord guy, not a line guy. He was into sound, texture, tactile sensation, incredibly sensitive setting of words, avant-garde playing techniques inside the piano and electric amplification and all kinds of weird stuff going on with crap loads of percussion, which I just adore. So yeah, it's its own world. And he was one of the few composers of contemporary and 20th century music who managed to do that. We've talked about this before. Remember that contemporary composers had this obsession that they had to reinvent music. It had to be their own thing and nobody else's thing, and they had to have their own style. And a lot of composers did that because that was easy, coming up with some noise no one ever did before. But it was very hard to create an actual expressive language and work within it and develop it to its fullest potential. But that is what Crumb did, which makes him one of the really great voices in contemporary music or in all music, because he found himself in his style and he used it to express emotions and feelings and create incredible beauty and terror and imagery and that appeals to everybody. It really does. If you're not a classical music person, if you're just like normal, and you're curious about things, I had my old roommate who passed away. Frank was his name. He loved George Crumb. We went to see some Crumb pieces. We heard the music. He met George, and he was as different from the normal classical music person as you could possibly imagine. A terrific person, but he had a very tough life. He had a fourth grade education. He just loved music. And when he heard Crumb, it just hit him like a thunderbolt with no preconceptions. If you listen to it without any kind of prejudice or bias, it's just an amazing experience. It really is. So let me tell you about these 5 recordings, which I've chosen basically, they're in no particular order. Here we have the Crumb Edition Volume 6. This has a bunch of pieces on it. Echoes of Time and the River, one of his very few orchestral pieces. He only wrote maybe 4 or 5 orchestral works because it was very difficult for him to get performances of his orchestral music. He was not part of the serial academic avant-garde, and his pieces tended to be kind of for unusual combinations of instruments and logistically complicated. Rumor had it that he was working on an orchestral piece in his last years, but unfortunately that didn't seem to come to fruition. He had an open commission with the New York Philharmonic. But anyway, we have Echoes of Time in the River, 4 processionals for orchestra, which is part of a series of pieces called Echoes, and it's just marvelously atmospheric. And then the Gnomic Variations for piano, which is from 1981, the 4 Nocturnes, it's Night Music 2, for violin and piano, Lux Aeterna with Gianni Gaetani and the Penn Contemporary Players. All of his vocal music was written for specific performers. Or most of it was anyway. He worked with these performers very closely. Like I said, he worked with Bridge on doing these performances, so they're as close to definitive as makes no difference. There's no such thing as definitive, of course. And a lot of his music has been recorded multiple times, which is a good thing. But there is something special about these performances. And I'm not going to get into the details of who does what for the most part, because all the performances are excellent. There's no issue with any performance, and the sonics are all great. And then the Pastoral Drone for organ, one of his very few works, maybe his only work for organ. I know there are a couple weird pieces for strange instruments he didn't otherwise use. So this is Volume 6. Then there's Volume 9. Oh my, this has Ancient Voices of Children, the piece that got it all started, and that fabulous recording with Gianni Gaetani on Nonsuch. I still have it. It's absolutely fabulous. It shows, Crumb's obsession with Lorca poetry, with Mahler, of course, who's Kindertotenlieder, haunts, the piece, and a bunch of other things like that. I mean, it's not tonal, it's not atonal. It uses shouting and speaking and funny noises and lots of percussive sounds and silence. It's just cosmic, amazing. Then eine kleine Mitternachtmusik, a little midnight music. This is Ruminations on Thelonious Monk's Round Midnight. Fascinating piece of music with Emanuele Archiuli, piano. And then the madrigals, books 1 through 4. Wonderful pieces for different small ensembles. Again, settings of Lorca texts. And this is Tony Arnold, soprano. Really, really marvelous pieces that go very well with ancient voices. Next, late in his career, Crumb created an amazing, a really epic series of pieces, the American Songbooks. I mean, there are like 6 or 7 installments of them, taking American folk songs and popular songs and arranging them for, piano, amplified piano, electronic piano of some kind, I think, possibly. And amplified piano and a boatload of percussion, tons and tons and tons of percussion, and setting them in the most wonderful ways, because these are pieces with well-known tunes, and how he handles the tunes and what he does to them and his imaginative recreation of them is really something to hear. It's just phenomenally wonderful. And the first one, well, this isn't the first one, but it's one of the greatest, I think, Unto the Hills, as sung by his daughter, the late Anne Crumb, who was an actress and singer and a fantastically gifted performer in her own right. And she has the perfect voice for this. And then on this disc, which is volume 9, we also have Black Angels, for electric string quartet with the Miro Quartet. This is amazing. And when we brought George Crumb, with the help of Bridge Records, to the Cannes Classical Awards, and they performed Black Angels. And oh my, what a powerful thing it is. It begins with The Night of the Electric Insects, one of the scariest sounds anybody ever created, and absolutely fabulous. And this is what turned on my buddy Frank to Crumb when he first heard The Night of the Electric Insects. I put it on, he said, "What the hell is that?" I said, "Well, it's called The Night of the Electric Insects." And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, but it is." That's exactly what it sounds like. It's so cool. So that's one of Crumb's masterpieces and one of the great string quartets written in the 20th century. And these cycles of American songs are just totally to die for. So that's that volume. Now we have, volume 4. Yes, volume 4 contains Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist is 6 tableaux for 2 amplified pianos. And in addition to Zeitgeist, we get some plastic attached to it. I opened it, but anyway. It also has Music for a Summer Evening, aka Macrocosmos 3. It's part of the Macrocosmos series. Now, Music for a Summer Evening gets performed quite frequently, thank you, with Bartók's Sonata for 2 pianos and percussion, because this is also written for 2 pianos and percussion, but the pianos are amplified. It is one of the greatest chamber works of the 20th century. I mean, just powerful. It's very popular. When people do like Crumb concerts and things, this is one of the pieces that they haul out most frequently. Like a lot of Crumb, it makes reference to earlier music, in this case Schubert's Wanderer Fantasy and some other things like that, and it's really powerful, just glorious. I just love this piece. Amazing. And last but not least, this is the 70th birthday album. Here it is. It contains his largest single work, Star Child, and one of his longest, at 35 minutes. It's a parable for soprano, antiphonal children's voices, male speaking choir, bell ringers, and large orchestra. It's quite the thing, and it's only 35 minutes long, so of course people aren't going to play it because it's too short. And then it's also got the 3 early songs with his daughter singing, Anne Crumb, who sings them from 1947, before he discovered himself as a composer. But he dug these up and let his daughter perform them. And finally, Mundus Canis, A Dog's World, which I believe was premiered at MEDEM at the Cannes Classical Awards concert. And I'm particularly fond of this adorable little work, in several movements, each of which was dedicated to one of Crumb's dogs. It's delightful because it's for guitar and percussion, first of all, with David Starobin playing the guitar. He also produced all these things, and he's a splendid guitarist. And George Crumb himself playing percussion, and he used my maracas because he loved my maracas. I had a beautiful set of maracas. They since self-destructed, unfortunately, but they were gorgeous, made of cocoa shells. They were imported from Venezuela and handcrafted. And George really loved the sound of those maracas, and so he used them. And so I feel like, well, maybe I had a little something to do with this series in a non-commercial and disinterested way, I hasten to add. So there you have it, my friends. One of the most important recording projects ever! Bridge Records' Complete George Crumb Edition, a labor of love, done with incredible perfectionism at the level of the very, very highest artistry in music that really matters, and which, had it not been for recordings, would probably never receive anything like the opportunity for general acclaim that it deserves. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.